You know, it's all.
Kenny, I was trying to forget. There he is. Bienvenidos.
Hi.
Greetings. I think we're.
I like this way better. It's shrunk. It's a shrinking cube.
Oh.
Yeah, just shrunk.
It wasn't like this last time.
What is it? Oh, I don't know. No, I don't know.
Yeah, that's.
It's gonna be good.
Like, whoa. That's all right.
I was on the Zoom last time, so.
Ready to rock and roll, you guys?
So,
All right. Hereby call the December 7th, 2022 Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. And do we need to do a roll call officially? Is that for the
I'll
record?
just note that everyone, except for Angela, is present, right?
Yep. And Perry won't be joining us. I told these guys already, he's got a bunch of other work he won't be chiming in. But I've got a couple things for him to share once we get into it. I guess let's move right along into the basic framework that Preston sent out and discuss meeting etiquette.
And I think before that, we had additions to the agenda, and JT, I think you had emailed out, there was specific items, or maybe just one that you wanted to talk through. Maybe it was establishment of task forces.
Yeah,
So, you're gonna add that, we can talk about that whenever you like.
sure. Let's do the etiquette part first,
Yeah.
and then, tag that in there. I think the lion's share of today's meeting is going to be discussing, as we discussed as a motion from last time, as far as the beneficial electrification, setting up goals and timeline, and really teasing apart the nuances of that, so that we can come up with a good. We can all come up with it, and I can deliver it to council for their edification and consideration as we arc into 2023, as far as what we discussed regarding changes of building codes coming up. And the idea is to get ahead of all that. But we'll come back to that. So it's that's going to be the lion's share of today's meeting. And I think we should start with the etiquette element of it.
Yeah, so yeah, first item is discussion regarding meeting etiquette that just kind of came about, was a request to just ensure that, and I really have no specific thoughts on how to frame the conversation, but just make sure we're inclusive and making sure we're respectful of everybody's thoughts and opinions and everything that's brought to the table at any given meeting, right? And it's interesting. I mean, we can go on and on about it, how interesting the hybrid approach to meetings is, given that some of us sit around a table and then sometimes folks can't join and then are attending virtually. So that added component can complicate things at times, but again, general reminder, and we do these general periodic reminders at the town council level, planning commission level, and some other advisory and advisory committee and boards. Just do your best to be as inclusive and respectful as possible of others as opinions are shared, and as views and opinions aren't always shared. I guess not everyone's different, right? Everyone has different thoughts and ideas, and so it's just important to embrace and try to be as positive as possible. So that's the way I'm laying it out. Would anyone else like to add anything on that regard?
I would, yeah, I'm actually the one that brought that up, and just from things that have come up, and I just feel like thanks for front loading that for sure. I think it's important that we're gonna be working together for 3 years. So I think it's important to all be okay talking about this and to just be able to respectfully agree to disagree instead of well, yeah, for sure. Just like Preston said, and some things I've noticed too. I think it's right now, I was just noticing when JT was talking, he made eye contact with everybody, and I'd like that's sort of like a deliberate skill. And I've seen some people focus on 1 or 2 people, and I think it's something that we could all aspire to just be inclusive when we're speaking as well. Let's try to get more comfortable with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else on that?
I'll add one thing in terms of my own discovery in this process too. We're a startup, right, as a committee. And it took me a while, both from the side of working with council and understanding my role in the municipal dynamic. It's there were similar analogs that I've had academically or journalistically, but it's a different methodology and different way to communicate and deliver information. And I've had to roll around the different facets and lenses through which I look at things in terms of issues and understanding my role in that. And then even down to this now position, and I wanted to segue this with Joyce as well. She brought up the notion of this chair position in here, right? So I've had to really figure out what this means. Is it just the organization of the meeting? Is it to champion some ideas that I've invested in my vacuum at home reading and researching? Is it to synthesize everything that everybody said here? And I would say, yes, it's all of that, right? And I realized to your point, as far as having differences of opinions, I realized, and I think this will segue into a lot of what we're going to discuss today. I realized that we're about to discuss something like the beneficial electrification thing. And I've come to a discovery that like Terry has one perspective on how to pursue this. Dave has another strategy. These guys have navigated their discussions in robust ways at their Zebra meetings. And I realized that if I zoom out, my responsibility, or I perceive my responsibility, is to then be able to say to council, I don't think let me back up. I don't think it's our job completely to resolve the issues. Our job, I can bring to council and say, here are differing salvos, different strategies on how to move forward on this. And this is the pros to this one strategy, and this is the cons, and this is the pros and cons of this strategy. And in this case, I'm just pitting you against Terry conveniently. But these are things that will flesh out. But I want to make sure that, and I wanted to assure you guys that as I've sat with this and taken it to heart, I want to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm not just going to council with just saying, we only have this one voice and this is what we think. I want to be able to go there in a rather Socratic way and say, these are also the questions we have. And we're struggling to come up with the best way to navigate this, whether it's on beneficial electrification or if it's on water issues or what our educational symposium might be. This is, some along those lines. I want to make sure I represent everybody's voice. And so I just want you to know that I put a lot of time into meditating on that. And hope that creates a clear avenue, especially if you don't feel like you've been heard or whether it's a nuanced thing or a big thing in this meeting, that you can say that to me directly and make sure that's accounted for, so that it's not just a mono-cultivated voice per se.
I think getting back to the etiquette topic, I think it'd be beneficial for either UJT or Preston to give us a brief review of the rules of order. Because there seems to have been some confusion once we get a motion seconded, and then we've had discussion, then discussion continues, and the motion just wasn't there a motion on the floor? And I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can certainly do that, review that formality, that process. Absolutely. Just a thought that came to mind. I think it was the first meeting on August 31st. JT was appointed as chair and Vicky as vice chair for the first 3 months, and Dave and Joyce as chair and vice chair respectively for the next 3 months. I think we're at that mark. If there's any desire to kind of revisit that, now's the time, but just a reminder.
And I said early on, but I didn't make the segue. Joyce and I discussed that the other day, whether, just as I'm like getting my feet on the ground and figuring this out, whether that's whether the mechanics of that is the best thing for this group or not. The only thing I can add into that on the practical side is I will be here for the January meeting. I will not be here for the February meeting and probably won't be able to join on Zoom then, but that's the only other.
Which is why you have a vice chair, or you'd be able to.
Yeah, I'll be there.
I'm open to discussion, but I feel like with a 3-year meeting or 3 years of being on this board, that rotating every 3 months, which is just every 3 meetings, seems pretty frequent. And just like what JT was saying, it takes a little while for someone to get in the groove. So for productivity of this board, I think it would be nice to consider a longer chair position. I'll leave that open to discussion for what other people think, but it seems like less than 6 months feels inefficient to change the guard. But whatever people think.
I agree with you.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to move to change the term.
We would need a motion in the second.
I move to change the term of the chair and co-chair to 6 months.
I second it.
There was no discussion on it, so it sounds like
Oh, there should, did I second it too quickly?
No.
Sorry.
if that's a thumbs up across the board, then we're super efficient. Look at us, we're kicking ass. Well done.
So the February meeting, you will attend.
Oh, God, yeah,
Just
do my best.
right.
Can I ask if, what can you ask about the, what are they called? The
Rule,
rules?
that's Robert's Rules of Order. It's how you run a meeting.
Well, I just wondered, could you, some things are better for me in writing. Could you do that in email instead of
Yeah,
taking a
absolutely.
meeting time?
Yeah, we have
I agree.
handbooks for both town council members and planning commission members too, and there's a lot of great resources in those handbooks related to, we got Robert's Rules of Order and other ethics pieces as well, so I'll email that information to you all.
Thanks.
Short and sweet.
Yeah, Cliff Notes.
A sticky.
It's pretty simple.
Alrighty, so we're not going to expand on that. We'll wait for that to come down the pike in an email.
Yeah.
Anything else anybody wants to add to the etiquette element of it? Alrighty. So then I don't want to do the task force stuff yet. But as the 2023 work plan is recommended to the town council and included in the proposed 2023 strategic plan, you want to give us the primer on that?
Absolutely. So in the packet that went out last week, I included the most recent version of the proposed strategic plan for 2023. It's a pretty lengthy document. If you took some time to look through it, you'll see there's quite a bit in there. You see it up on the screen, and it's organized by community value as outlined in the master plan. And it's a fabulous document. I'm really proud of how it's framed, outlined. This came about from a master plan update in 2019 when I wasn't even here, and I think the world of how it's organized. And so under the first community value, healthy and natural environment, I gave a go at trying to synthesize or summarize the conversation, the last your last meeting, right? It was, well, appreciate that. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, in short, that was it. Tried to summarize kind of the outcomes from that conversation. Did I miss the mark? Maybe, maybe not.
No.
But really wanted to bring this to your attention because December 14th is when the budget is slated to be adopted by the town council. And the strategic plan will be as well. So if there's any desire to see any of these priorities or goals modified, now's the time to have that conversation. Again, I thought it was a fabulous meeting and a fabulous conversation. If you remember, I had to chime in and say, we got to walk before we can run. These, the information here on the screen is my attempt at making sure that we walk before we run. So, again, if there's any desire to see this modified, enhanced in any way, now's the time. I can make this larger.
I second
Oh, thank you.
The one thing that I noticed, and I actually read the whole thing, was the water, gray water is mentioned further down
Right.
in another sub chapter in there. So it gets a little bit of airtime. And it's something I don't really want to let go of, but I get the walk before we crawl before we walk, really.
Right.
So this is really good.
Thank you. And on the gray water piece, I'm participating on the stakeholder committee for Regulation 86 at the state level. And there's, I think maybe I said this at the previous meeting. Sorry if I'm being redundant, but there's participants from communities all across the state that are very interested in adopting some form of Regulation 86 to allow either laundry to landscape or whatever the other method is. And a lot of communities haven't adopted yet because it's so stringent and very cost prohibitive. And I'm looking forward to March of 23 in a couple months' time, really, when the outcomes from the stakeholder group will be presented to the Water Quality Control Commission and seeing how we might be able to make some modifications to that regulation. So we have a seat at the table. Yeah, we're keeping a pulse on that.
So Preston, one question on this, on your second bullet, could we say, and by July 1st, 2023, recommend adoption of an energy code?
Well, that's what the energy code people actually are saying in the energy code by July 1st.
Well,
If we
what,
change our plans before July 1st, then it needs to move forward with what the energy board is requiring.
right, so any code change we make after July 1st, we're supposed to.
Before
incorporate-
July 1st,
I'm sorry,
before July 1st
No.
also.
no,
Well,
because,
it says it in the reading. If you do change it before July 1st, there is a statement in there. But anyway, that's semantics of
right,
a
because I
date.
think what happens, House Bill 1362, they vote on it on 31 March. And it has to pass by 2/3 majority from the committee. If it doesn't pass, then they have 6 weeks for the executive committee to finalize it. And then it's supposed to be presented and on or after July 1st, or after July 1st, any group that changes their code needs to incorporate that. So that's what the bill says. I'm just wondering, can we say, when by July 1st, recommend adoption of an energy code? Is that too aggressive? Because I'd love to see.
Yeah, that's what if I remember right, I took this language from the bill, and in the way you laid it out, that's how I recall it. And I think the way I wrote it, the way I tried to interpret this was that we want to wait for the Energy Code Board to come up with their recommendations and then go from
Right.
there
Right.
to meet the statute, or to meet the bill.
Well,
So,
what you sent email, this is what was in it. Can I read it?
Sure.
It says, when adopting, and it's all, there's no spaces between the words, so excuse me, when adopting or updating a building code prior to July 1st, 2023, a board of county commissioners or government shall adopt and enforce an energy code that achieves equivalent or better energy performance than one of the 3 most recent editions of the International Energy Conservation Code. So they actually do give you an option to do something before July 1st. I mean, I don't think it matters, but it is in there, just
Sure.
saying.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think specifically for the electric ready, it's gonna be July 1st, and I may have typed something that's different, but I think it's, to me, I would say by July 1st, I think we'll have the wording by 31 March. We've got Kim on the committee. I suspect that they will come up with something. Certainly we'll have it by the middle of April. I think the only question is going to be the issue of exceptions. And do we accept some of like the 1% cost, then you can apply for an exception, or do we change that? We eliminate that totally, which we could do, or do we change it to a 5%, or is it, if the garage is this far from the house, you don't have to do that. And that's for a later discussion, but I would love to see that say, and by July 1st, recommend adoption of an energy code for use.
Certainly, yeah, I mean, so this goal specific to recommending adoption, and adoption wouldn't take place until,
Great.
after that. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly think that could be modified. And then, couple that with the need for public engagement and those conversations, which will inevitably prolong the process for the good, of course.
Right.
But yeah, it's a very collaborative process. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
One of the practical things that I've been chewing on is the gap in time there between what we're gonna learn April 1 or even before then. And I know the dynamics of the moratorium, but what happens in that interim as you're engaging applications coming in the door as the moratorium ends? Are you going to be pointing in this process all of this new information that's going to be still in limbo and not fully resolved as those applications come in the door as far as code?
Well, the moratorium won't be lifted until the Chapter 7 updates are adopted by the town council. So, and we're, as you know, well underway. We just had a great meeting with the planning commission to review those proposed updates. Katie and TJ, our planning consultants, have spent hours and hours and hours, and I know that because I've seen the invoices for that work. It's not a small amount by any means, and we're off to the races and planning to go back to planning commission with a draft ordinance in January. Hold an open house for developers either in late January, maybe February, get to town council level for 2 readings potentially. I'm thinking out loud, maybe February, March, or March and April. At which point, when all of that is in place, the moratorium is lifted, we get to start accepting new development applications again, and move on to other pieces of the strategic plan, specifically energy code upgrade piece. If the question is specific to how this might hang up or be related to the moratorium, it's not.
It shouldn't. I mean, it's just, basically it's stepping on each other. It's two things temporarily are stepping on each other's toes, right? I mean, the end of the moratorium is March 31st.
Right.
And April 1st is when theoretically it'll be public information coming from the state. And so then do we foresee floodgates of applications, or do you just feel like you're going to see the number of applications to?
I do not foresee, I don't know if you didn't mean to cut you off if you didn't finish your thought, but I don't foresee like a flooding of development applications. You never really know. We haven't received many inquiries from potential developers on wanting to develop multi-site or PUDs on specific sites, and probably because there's a moratorium in effect. But I don't envision on April 1st, if everything goes according to plan, once we have Chapter 7 rewritten and much more efficient and clear for staff and the development community, I don't think we're going to get slammed.
Okay.
For a number of reasons. Could I be incorrect? Absolutely. But I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
So.
Got it. I mean, I know the motivation to discuss this at this point was to make sure that we were out ahead of this, and thanks for rolling this into this, because that makes it our job easier to get it on the radar of council.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last bullet there on the education piece. I'm excited to see what comes about from that conversation. I do want to throw out, maybe I've thrown it out before, but the Youth Advisory Council established a Google site last year, which is a standalone website that you can navigate to through the town's website. But I think that might be a really good resource or a good tool to to utilize. I had never utilized Google, the Google site function until last year, and I think it's very user friendly, and the youth council had a lot of fun putting information on there and recapping meetings and uploading videos from their meetings on there. There's some other functions, of course, but that may be a potential avenue for educating and having that clearinghouse that we talked about a few meetings ago. Is it the only tool? No, but it's just an idea when the time comes to really start undertaking that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think getting students is a win-win too. Timing. To do anything but play video games.
Well, we discussed it at the last council meeting because we only had 2 applicants from the youth advisory board. You know, it's right. It left us basically trying to keep them in motion, but there really weren't even enough to keep it going. But I certainly, from the beginning of the discussion of this and the foundation of this, having youth advisory board member present for this, I think is going to be great in the long run.
Good.
All right. No, I don't remember hearing about that Google site, or did it went over my head.
No, I don't think I had mentioned that
Oh.
before. Well, at least not in this realm, but option. It's an option.
Okay. Should we move, and I'm asking this openly, should we, on the heels of this, should we open up our discussion about the beneficial electrification element at this point, or do we want to resolve, let me just go back to this here. Or should we get into item number 3 on the, as far as the cap is concerned? San Miguel and Ridgway County and our holding, our efforts in that.
I think we have to just keep going with the
Finish.
electrification.
All right.
I mean, so some of us one-on-one have had discussions and talked about how nice it would be if we could write down our goals and have sort of a goal document. And so JT had asked that I put some words on paper that we could take a look at and decide to accept, reject, modify, whatever. But, you know, just to kind of clarify where we are and where we want to go with this electrification goal. So I did that. I will pass them out. Right. You know,
Have one. Great. Unless you've updated it since.
probably did. So, and as I look at the, all right.
Thank you.
All right, President. Sorry to do it.
New cable time.
Cable time. Oh, man. Sorry. So to start with, I mean, I see the beneficial electrification thing, and this is sort of what Terry and I have had good discussions over, because he's ready to jump to step 2 and jump over step 1. And I personally think it makes sense to do step 1 before we do step 2. And I think Colorado is telling us that too because of the codes that are coming out. So, you know, so I see this for this committee, we'll do step 1 and then, 2023, and then we can start thinking about step 2 and step 3. We can start thinking about, do we require homes to be all electric, or do we, what do we do with existing buildings? But I would recommend right now as our initial goal, step 1. So by the summer of 2023, do this, electric new buildings, code language. And that's what I have here, action 1. So electric ready, new building construction, homes and businesses, and you can read the goal statement there. I don't read that to you.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I thought we were gonna do solar electric ready
It,
at the same
it
time.
does include, the last line of that goal statement says buildings will have either conduit or pre-wiring for solar.
Maybe it should say solar electric ready so that there's no confusion with people.
Yeah, it just depends upon your definition of what electric ready is, but I think it's gonna be what the Colorado code is.
Right.
So,
But all electric doesn't necessarily mean solar because you can attach to the grid and you're running on coal. You know what I mean? I don't see why it can't be solar electric ready. Because roofs have to be beefed up for solar panels, so that should be something that's in the mix right off the bat. That's just my. Anyway.
sure, or it could be solar and electric ready. Yeah, it's also, it's solar EV and electric ready, but it's, yeah. I mean,
Those would be, to your point, Dana, I agree, but really teasing apart that language there and getting it really clear in terms of, because I think a lot of us can understand it, but if you say photovoltaic, people will say, well, what about solar? That does happen. And so being very specific in that language. And just to back out a second, you guys make sure that we're looking through the right lenses. We're discussing a process that Dave is suggesting, whereby we phase it from electric ready as a stage before we go to all electric mandatory. And just so you guys have a reference, it was talked about that the debates and discussions that have happened between Dave and Terry. Terry's of the opinion, I'm speaking on his behalf, or just sharing what he said. He feels that it's an unnecessary added bureaucratic step to phase it that way. He believes because he already has 200 multi-unit buildings going into effect, and the contractors are already doing all electric. He feels like we should just go straight to the all electric mandate in this process rather than phasing it in these different
But
times.
that means that the roofs are not required to be supportable for solar. So you're knocking out one of the key ingredients of carbon sequestration is to have it be solar. And if you're just going to do electric and not have people have it solar ready, the roof has to be supportable for solar.
May I interject?
For all new buildings, to me, that's a nuance that's new to me, Dana, because any new construction in my mind has the integrity to support it. So I don't know.
But I was-
Phase to create doesn't have room for solar on the roof. They didn't allow for it. So
It does.
that's not what I've been told from the guy that built it. He said there wasn't enough room on the roof for solar. When I was in front of your council once and he was here. Yeah, he said that we didn't allow, there's not enough room on the roof for solar.
And actually, in that place is, it has all the conduit in it
Yeah,
already.
it's ready.
Well, I don't know why he said that. That's what he told me. He said there
Well,
wasn't enough room.
Room on the roof is a different issue than structural support for panels.
Right.
And most modern, like JT said, modern construction, the roof framing is sized for snow load and extra double snow load actually. So solar panels are a significant increase in the load on roofs. And a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my house was built in 92, and I had solar panels put on a couple years ago. It's really like that.
Now, the example that would fit into this category is a house from the 1920s or something with 2x4s on 3-foot centers. And yeah, then you're going to have, there is some weight there. It's a lot of glass.
on a retrofit issue. Yeah, specifically, we're talking about at this point,
Lucas,
all new construction, and we're talking, at least in general, we're talking residential and businesses. We're not, and ideally multi-units as well. But oh God, what was I going to say, Dana?
Well, the
When-
document that you sent me to read, they mentioned being solar and electric ready.
Mhm,
They have paragraphs for both of those.
mhm.
I have no problem with that.
And one thing I wanted to add is that, and I know this conversation has happened, just to add to the information in this. I know the conversation that Dave and Terry have had, and then we also had at the roundtable discussion last week at SMPA, is that fortunately, and I'm giving them a pitch, San Miguel is working towards, and Terry specifically, but the whole organization is working towards the greenification, towards decarbonization of the electricity that they're providing to their customers. And if, you know, we're going through this process of the electric ready or all electric, whatever we ultimately, what path we decide to go down strategy wise. With the grid tie system, we're actually working in reciprocity with San Miguel Power. I know Dave is like, you know, Dave has promoted that they should be working as hard as they can to pull away from coal, and I think they are, but it's a give and take process. It's a big political issue in terms of longstanding contracts, tri-state, and that stuff happens in one sphere, but in terms of what we can control from the town side is the coded elements of it here.
Well, here's what you had us read. This is what their definition of solar ready means: adequate panel capacity, dedicated electrical panel space, electrical conduit, physical roof space, and structural load to accommodate future installation of solar panels with exemptions for small roofs and consistently shady roofs. And that's from the code that we will adopt after July 1st, probably. This is in that packet.
That may have been in the Utah.
Which one are you reading?
I'm reading from what you sent us to read about with the people in Denver that are doing this whole code.
Tell me specifically, because there's a lot in there to read. So,
Well, it's not Hillsville. I don't know. I just pulled it off and printed it, but it's not that though.
It's not that?
No, that's the next thing going down. This is what is in the Energy Code Board. This is what they're working
from
through.
the Colorado.
Yeah, from Colorado.
Okay. I
Thank
was
you, I'm
making sure it
sorry.
wasn't Utah.
No, it wasn't Utah. It was what you sent us to peruse through.
Right.
And I perused through it and I just printed these two out.
Oh,
Yeah,
the one that I linked you to directly and then.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
But they don't
Yeah.
have language yet, Energy Code Board, they're still,
Well, then maybe this is from the big Mamu then.
I know we will get that language, and when we do, we'll see what Colorado.
Or we create our own.
Um,
Got the point?
Yeah, I think then we'd be reinventing the wheel unnecessarily right now.
Right.
I mean, and that's the point of what we had all agreed on before is that this code is coming down the pike. But we don't know exactly what it's gonna look like. They don't know exactly what it's gonna look like. But in terms of understanding all of the different options that are on the table at this point is trying to be able to coalesce that for the edification of council.
Well, I
So that
certainly
we
think
can-
that solar should be in there. I'm sorry. I don't see why it
Well,
isn't.
yeah, let's add that to the wording there. And I do think that the Energy Code Board will come up with wording like
Right.
this. I think that we will, need to tweak it a little bit because we know that there'll be some exceptions that we may not need to pursue. But I think this overall, the solar and electric ready new building construction goal is what we're heading for, and by the summer of 2023. But he had asked that we put together why are we doing this, which is part of our education campaign. When people ask, why are you doing this to me? So I wrote a couple and I'll let you read through them. The one is brief and, refers to the Colorado legislation bill that is coming out, and the other has a little additional background.
And having read through this on the first draft that you sent me, Dave, I think in terms of the why part of it, I do think we have to be very clear right on the get-go that we are already, signatories and participants in the goals for the CAT. And so when it comes to the education side, without having to go through a whole explanation, this is just a communications element of it, is that we say that we're already participant in this process and we're trying to achieve those goals in concert. And these plans will help us get us down that path to decarbonization as a community. Yeah.
Just a step bit back so I can kind of understand. So Preston kind of did a really good job of putting 3 bullet points on the board, and all the items that we're discussing fall under those 3 bullet points. So is our goal for this meeting for our board to kind of agree and say, yes, these 3 bullets that Preston put together, we all kind of agree and support that, and those are kind of our primary goals. And then some of these details that we're talking are kind of refining the 3 bullet points. Like that's how I'm kind of seeing how this discussion is going, but I know that all of us have different opinions and there's so much like we want to change, but his says electric and solar ready and things like that. Like, does it make sense for, it's almost 6 o'clock, that before the end of this meeting that we make sure that we all, vote and say like, yes, these are our 3 primary goals, but we would like further discussion on defining what that means. I just want to ask, because I didn't want to get like
No.
running again.
You're going to be the best chair ever. No. And to your point, what we discussed the other day in terms of setting up those goals, I think that's a great way to steer this. Absolutely. When I sent that letter to everybody, on top of it, I didn't fully understand where this was going in relationship to what Dave was going to present as well. I figured they just overlap. But to your point, I think that is an effective way. And how do you feel about in terms of what you want to share from this?
Well, I don't know what to say. I think the question of, do we need more written goals, and you asked for, what, when, why? I think the next steps, after we read through the why here, the step 2 is going to be the most important thing for this committee, and that's the education piece. And I was hoping we'd get through the front of this and start talking about education. What are our goals there? I think, your statement that, including the whatever date regional climate action plan is a good addition. We can put that in the why. Sure. Any other?
According to our minutes, which I wrote for my last meeting, we already made the motion to focus on all new building permits requiring electric and solar ready structures, and it was seconded by Angela. So we already voted on that. It's already, we've already done it. We don't need to vote on it again. We did it last
Well, I
time. We
think
just
what
need to work
Dave put
on
together
it.
is great, and
Oh, yeah.
I think that it's not gonna go in vain. I think when we dive into the education piece and like what we put, a lot of this stuff is gonna come back up. I just wanted
Right.
clarification from Preston of like,
Yeah, so if I can just offer, I love the way you put that. I 100% agree with what you're saying. I think the purpose of the initial conversation here is to make sure we're in agreement with the goals, which were motioned and voted on at the last meeting, and that's how this came about. I tried to summarize what I heard based on that motion of vote. So if you want to change anything, you can motion to vote again to modify it. Dave, what you've provided is fantastic, and I'm just offering my perspective of how I see this. I think what you've put together is furthering some of the specific goals and getting to step 2, right? Further refining how to get there, how to achieve the goals and build upon, what's right here. Because this is the easy part, right? Identifying the goals. This is the hard part.
Right.
How are we gonna go? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think.
So that
Sausage.
So, thank you for that. But, I think the first step is just to make sure we're all in agreement on the goals, and then, again, Dave, well done. And I think this is a good go at trying to further the combo.
Yeah, just trying to flesh things out a little bit. I think, so, I mean, you can read through the whys, so we can, that becomes, I think, part of the education piece. We need to educate people while we're doing this. The exceptions piece, I think we gotta wait till we see what they come up with before we talk about exceptions, But then the action 2, which is the education, that's where I see this committee. We need to help educate the community and others. Why are we doing this? And one of the neat things that's coming out, of course, is this IRA, and you can see the second sheet that I have here, just some notes on local heat pump rebates. With the IRA heat pump rebate, we've got an SMPA heat pump rebate, we've got a Colorado heat pump rebate. How do you put all those together, and how do you educate people so that not only do they make their homes electric ready, but they go ahead and buy the electric appliances, because it's, we can educate them that it's cheaper to buy a heat pump, an electric hot water heater, and here's, what you're gonna get. And it's, more healthy to have, electric stove and a gas stove, and, we provide that information to them to try to change behavior.
That might be putting the cart before the horse here, but if we get into retrofitting older houses, and by older, I mean, even 20 years old.
Sure.
Mine, for example, where we have a gas water heater and a gas furnace and a 100-amp panel. And I wonder if San Miguel has put on their radar rebates and incentives for upgrading panels, basically.
Yeah, the IRA has, well, one thing to keep in mind with the Inflation Reduction Act rebates is they are mainly, but most of the rebates are based on your income. So if you make less than, and it's based on a number of them are based on the median income in your area. And so, and that's, again, we're going to have to flesh that out and help people understand what is the median income in your county, what is it in San Miguel County. I have some of that here on the heat pump sheet, but there is up to a $4,000 rebate from the IRA for your panel in your house. If you don't make much money, you can, it's up to a $4,000 rebate, and there's some rewiring up to $1,500. So again, helping people understand what rebates are out there, and will SMPA, come up with other rebates there? Can we find some Colorado rebates?
Just, can I interject on that? Just in a simple form of it, Sean, who recently with Eco Action Partners, gave us a breakdown of the IRA and how that's going to affect everybody in this region. And he's still working to tease some of that stuff apart, but he did a great summary. I'll share that summary with everybody. There's also another meeting tomorrow with the Mountain Towns 2030. It's also climate action and the Inflation Reduction Act. If you wanted to follow that tomorrow, it'll show, it'll walk you through how the IRA is affecting all of those rebates as well. So, yes, I mean, to your point, and to your point, with the IRA coming out, everybody's still trying to decipher what's in it. And also now that that's overlapped with the change of codes in the state as well. And the folks, Kim is going to be taking Sean's advice as well from the IRA, because everybody's a little overwhelmed with the amount of information coming up on that. I can share with that link if anybody, I have
Be great.
this is the one for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Happy to share it if you just, and I'll do that right towards the end of the meeting here.
It's 11 to 12:30.
Yeah.
Call.
Yeah, and there's also another one on heat pumps tomorrow at exactly the same time. And I was on webinars all day today as well, so.
Will this be recorded?
Yeah. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I was on the one all day today on the agrivoltaic side of it, on the research webinar, and I'll share that with folks as well. But yeah, I'll share the Mountain Towns one at the end of the meeting.
Even though the IRA rebates start on the 1st of January, there's still a fair bit of uncertainty. Because most of those rebates come through Colorado, and Colorado can figure out how they're gonna make them work. And so, when you talk about when do we start the education after we understand it, it's good time. So
Now.
yeah, I mean, we need to educate ourselves as soon as we can, because we don't want to put out bad information. But right now, people don't know exactly how all this is going to work. And SMPA is looking at their rebates and saying, maybe we need to change our rebates a little bit in response to this. One of the things that, that they have a rebate on is heat storage media that can go with your furnace. And maybe they want to increase that rebate because that will allow you to generate heat when electricity rates are low and store it and use it in the evening when rates are high. So there's a lot coming out. Wow. And we need to all get smart. And once we know what's coming out, then how, what are the ideas to consider? I put down some of these ideas, but certainly getting the kids in front is a great idea, and putting it on their website. Any other and who is the educator here? Is it this committee? Are we going to lean on other groups? Who takes the?
Let's hope so, because I don't think we know.
So if I can just real quick, maybe I didn't make it clear before, but the Google site idea was meant like, what I meant was the Sustainability Advisory Board could create its own site. Hopefully you guys didn't think, oh yeah, let's put it on the Youth Council site. That's an option, but it's an easy avenue to create your own web page for that clearinghouse. So sorry if I didn't make yours. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Just one thing, just super quick, we just did a heat pump on provisions, and the man that put it in said to wait a little while because the refrigerant they use is going to get better. So I just want to throw that out for us because he seemed to know what he was talking about. And also, I'm putting up a board on the side of provisions, a community bulletin board. Half of it's going to be climate, the other half's just going to be messaging for the town. So my son's in the process of creating it. It's going to be pretty big. So, and it's not going to be locked, and it's going to be available. And then just one more thing. I did go to Crested Butte when they voted in their compass document. I just had to be there to see the people. And I met the man who wrote this document, the compass, and he's more than willing to talk to us. Zoom, he wrote to maybe give us some direction if we want to do that. His name is Troy Russ, and he said he'd be more than happy to talk to us. If you guys want it, I can set it up for the next meeting. I don't know. You want to talk to him?
Yeah, it seems, I don't know, I mean, they've gone all the way
Yeah,
to requiring electrification. You know,
well, they got it passed in a town that's developing almost faster than ours. So I'd love to know how they got everybody on board for that.
They didn't.
They
They didn't
didn't.
get everybody on
they
board.
did.
Well, they got it passed.
They got the council on board, but that's a whole nother discussion. That is an important part of our discussion, which I,
Well, anyway, if you guys
To today.
are interested, let me know and I'll let him know. I mean, are you interested or
I
not?
think that'd be.
Next time?
informative, Just to get his take on what
How
really is
they-
happening in the community.
I was so
I mean,
impressed.
I would be, I'd be surprised if everybody's on board, and I'm pretty sure everybody is not on board. So,
no, not everybody was. They did pass it, but,
yeah.
Well, maybe he
there
can give
was-
us some insight since they
Yeah,
got him.
and there was the,
webinar.
I think it is in there. There was the webinar on it when they discussed it and they discussed the pros and the cons of how they
Well,
were
maybe
traveling.
you guys aren't, I could just talk to him if it's nobody here.
Well, the pros and cons and some of the discussion are in the Google Drive.
Right, but hearing from the person that wrote the document.
Sure, but all of that was summarized by that person.
Okay, never mind. I'll just.
So
go
no, I
with
think
some.
it is beneficial. It was just a curveball in our discussions.
But it might be an issue of timing. I think, you know, once we do step one, step two, which is all electric homes. If we have him come in 6 months or something like that, where they've already, you know, they got some experience, they've used this for 6 months, and we're ready to move to the second step. That might be a helpful discussion. You know, so.
And the reason I had asked Dave, just so you guys understand the background of why I asked about the who, what, where, when, why, and how, is to come to the council and say, why are we even as a committee here discussing this? Well, it's in our objectives to achieve the goals of the cap, right? That's number one. And I want to be able to then unpack for them what are these issues here and give them anecdotes, Crescent View being one of them. So I do think it is beneficial to have a discussion with that person, Dana. I wasn't saying no on that. I was just trying to figure out where that fit in this meeting.
Okay,
So, yeah, I think to those points, following what Joyce pointed out on here is that making sure that we get this in front of the council. And if there's anything else we want to add to this nuance, this might be our practical template to work on right now at this meeting here.
So I guess my question here is, okay, I mean, we thought we all agreed with this. Let's say by July 1st, but otherwise it's perfect. We've got our motion, you know, we've written
I
down.
don't agree. I don't think it's perfect because we voted to say electric and solar and all we're mentioning is electric.
It says electric and solar on the
Where?
first bullet point,
Where?
explore
Okay.
mandate. To be all.
Okay, great. That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just was going by
Yeah,
your
so
document.
I mean, I think this all looks good. I guess my question is, next step for this committee, what follows? And from, I guess where I sit, I'm thinking that, I mean, the council is going to have to pass the legislation, but, you know, we'll probably appreciate some help with the education. So I think board is a good idea. Are there other, you know, how do we mobilize ourselves as an educational task force to help get something out like this?
To that, I was gonna make the suggestion that come for the March meeting for town council, as that'll be a pivotal point ahead of the end of the moratorium, just ahead of what the state board is gonna hand down, that maybe our educational component of it is that we organize together to come to have this Sustainability Advisory Board present to the town the questions that are being proposed to all towns, the code changes and to be able to illuminate the council on the pros and cons. Everything from the electric ready to the all electric debate as far as a general, and then to give the breakdown, how to get to those from point A to point Z.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Terry and I are still in disagreement there. And at the end of the conversation, we all agree that you go electric ready, you just don't stop.
Yeah.
But, and we can certainly present to the town council. I think town council is probably pretty well educated. Question I have is, how do we educate our community
Builders.
yeah, how do we get that out? Because to me, it seems like this will go much easier, and council and town will get beat up a lot less if we can come up with the way to educate people and help people understand why we're doing this.
When I was on town council, it seems like if there's a hot topic going on that's gonna affect a lot of people. Something that happened a lot would be like, I think they call it workshops, and this room would be totally filled with people that had vested interest in whatever was happening. And so that seems like a really great forum to get a lot of people together at once, but like how getting them to know about it is like.
Well, I thought I'd put a sign up sheet on, once I get that board up, for people that are interested to put their email down or something, and then we could, like this document that you just wrote, we could send that out, things that we are creating with our. I mean, that's the only thing I can think is, unless we have a meeting.
Can I,
Go for it,
in
Joyce.
the beginning, Preston had said with, all the great work the consultant is doing, there is going to be possibly a meeting with the developers to give them updates on how you're modifying the application process. Would that be an appropriate location to also mention like electric grid and like proposed building code modifications?
I think
Or
that's a wonderful question. The short answer would be probably not. It depends on how far it gets advanced. If I can, anyway, love the thought. A standalone workshop of similar nature may work, but this group would need to be ready. And in order to be ready, I would offer that at each meeting, you set aside time to talk about each specific goal and how to advance. If you're talking about, Dave, I don't want to pick on you, but I hear you keep talking about education, and I'm not really understanding what we're going to be educating on. I mean, I hear the electric ready and solar ready piece, but there's a lot of other components on the education that as outlined in that goal that can be hit upon. So I think we just got to take it baby steps and really figure out what we're educating, what the messaging is going to be, and then how to achieve that. And I think it was on the second page of this. I mean, you got website, newspaper articles, handouts, some newsletter opportunities, SMPA, and probably others. There's other publications and bulletin boards. We're about to have another bulletin board that Dana was talking about. So there's a lot of avenues, but what is the messaging? What is the information that folks want to hear about it at a past meeting? Terry had talked, and it seemed like everyone was in agreement about really trying to get together all the funding opportunities and rebates available through SMPA and maybe some other utility companies, and promoting that on this clearinghouse website. I haven't heard that mentioned, but I think that's a critical piece. So I think we just need to be very clear, as it relates to education, what we're intending.
Right.
So I'll just
It makes
stop
total
there.
sense.
I'll offer that based on the conversation, but Joyce, I love that line of thinking, but I don't know if at that point in January, if we could certainly make a slot available to this group to plug what the goals of the committee are and what the intentions are to get an ordinance or legislation passed at the local level related to electric ready and solar ready stuff, since we'll have a room hopefully full of developers in the building community, but it just depends.
So I guess my question is, I think what you said is that based on the last meeting, these 3 bullet points, essentially we've approved them. We can modify them if we want to vote, but these are ready to go. These are kind of our goals for now. So now we just kind of need to hash out some of this stuff. And I think based on what the conversation, the way it's going, there's a little debate on timeline for when the next bill needs to be adopted. But I would say like, if we just start talking about bullet number 1 of being EV and solar ready, or electric ready and solar ready, like I would propose that maybe we talk like, can we as a committee recommend that all new commercial and residential buildings, especially like multi-family buildings, be at least evaluated to be EV and solar ready until we have the ability to make recommendations to the building code modifications that are coming out in July. So that way, like, anything, so what was discussed earlier was we're not gonna have a new code ready until July 1 or after that will get adopted, but the moratorium is getting lifted. And could that way, until we have a new code adopted, that we still have new construction having the EV and solar.
So I think I understand what you're asking. The energy code upgrade piece has no bearing on the all electric ready and solar.
Okay.
Piece. That's a whole separate initiative, right?
Mhm.
What the energy conservation or the energy board's going to come up with, they're not going to come up with all electric EV ready and solar ready mandates for communities, right? So if I understood your question, to focus on bullet number 1, my recommendation would be this group look at mandates in other communities, look at code text in other communities and see how it might fit a community the size of Ridgway, because that's what it would take to get this mandate in place. That the town council wouldn't just like motion and vote to make it happen. It'd be nice if it was simple as that, but it would need to be memorialized and codified in the Ridgway municipal code somehow, and you know that. And we just need to better understand and define how to memorialize that in the code. And so doing that research on mandates like that in comparable communities would be a good first step. The energy code upgrade piece, we already understand that track, given that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, as you said. So
let me ask you this, Preston, if you weren't here as part of this group and you wanted deliverables to answer bullet point 1 as town manager and what you would want for us to deliver to council, can you hold our hands and tell us, like you just said, comparative code from other towns, which we dug into from seeing stuff that's on the table in Utah. We've seen what's happened in Crested Butte. There's other comps as well. What is the most practical first step for us to put something on your desk from this committee? What would you want to see that would help you get down the road towards achieving these?
Pretty much what I just outlined. That question makes a ton of sense. In terms of final deliverable, we've looked at this community, and this community. What's been enacted in all 3 is great. Crested Butte, it's just an example. Crested Butte by far is the one that we collectively as a group really like and would recommend for our community. And then in this scenario, I would say, great. Well, let me take a look at it. We'll put some code text together based on that, bring it back to you all for review, further massaging, consideration, in an effort to get it ready to go to the next step, which would be potentially the planning commission, maybe not, it just depends, ultimately the town council. And in theory, well, everyone on council will already know that it's an agreed upon goal. Since it's in the strategic plan, it should be ready by the time that let's say the August of 2023 council meeting comes around and they see an agenda item for a work session or a discussion about code updates related to EV ready and solar ready. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's very broad. line of
It
thinking there.
doesn't make total sense to me that what I hear you saying is like, town council's not gonna consider it passing anything unless somebody else has already done it first. It's like, somebody's gotta start.
Someone's gotta start.
Why is Ridgway only gonna say yes if like Crested Butte and Utah and other communities have already done it?
Well, no, I mean.
It seems like a pretty big hurdle.
Well, I mean, I'm not fearful that we are. It's not that we're reinventing the wheel, but in terms of us, I think we have the capacity here to do the research to know which communities have successfully or unsuccessfully pursued this as homework, to educate the council on that front and to say Crested Butte did it in this manner, and these are the pros of their process and these were the cons of their process, as a means to keep Ridgway from having to just try to do everything in a vacuum. Right? I feel like that's part of our educational process. Is that a fair read on that?
I think that's correct.
That's what I got to. I have a question for Joyce. Is your intent to get out in front of this date?
Yeah.
Something, I agree.
I think I understood wrong, but I thought that the energy code upgrade would impact building development requirements. Is that not the case?
I think that's
Okay.
that's true to some
Yeah.
extent.
Right, and so then, yes, Ken, that's my goal, was to make sure that we don't have a large gap between the moratorium being lifted and then when the energy code modifications were adopted. So that was, I think everyone wants to do that, but it's really helpful that Preston is providing an outline of how do we make that happen, how do we propose that to council. So, thank you.
I have a question. So what you're saying is basically you want us to maybe make some statements like what Dave has awesomely done with his goal statement? Is that what you're saying? That we
Say that one more
need
time.
to come up with specifics like Dave put in for the goal statement, which is specifically stating things like the size of the wiring and the water eating. I mean, literally
Oh, yeah, I mean,
specific.
those are important pieces, absolutely, and I think that specificity is needed.
So we look at different towns' codes and pick and choose what we think is awesome.
Yeah. Right,
Okay,
and
Yeah.
going back to what,
right. I mean, I just want to know I'm hearing this right.
what's awesome and what fits Ridgway.
Why don't each of us take a town and research their codes and come back and compare?
Yeah, and we don't know what the towns are, we know Crested,
Well, I'll
maybe
take-
some others, but yeah,
Boulder is awesome, Aspen's good.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I'm a little confused because it seems to me that might be an important piece in step 2 when we talk about making things all electric. But in step 1, we've got House Bill 1362 and we've got Colorado code language coming down the pike, which to me is going to make it easy.
Yep.
To accept this. And so, I mean, I agree with you. I don't want this to slip. That's why I like, and by July 1st and not, on or after, because that could be, 2026. But I'm not sure that the council is going to need what other towns are doing, because this is mandated for Colorado.
So you're talking energy code upgrade, you're talking bullet 2, I'm talking about bullet 1, which is separate from bullet 2. The EV ready, the EV
Right.
ready and solar ready, which is not, in theory, not going to be addressed to the extent that we wanted to in the energy code upgrade, that the energy code board is going to be recommending on. That makes sense?
No, not to me, because I thought Energy Code Board was basically the electric ready. That's what the Energy Code upgrade ready
Sorry.
is. It is going to be a
So,
electric ready, solar ready
That's how I
energy
understood
code.
it too. That's why I
And-
understand why we have to find out.
and the piece there is we don't know to what level the requirements or mandates are gonna be for the upgrade for the new energy code, right? And so,
I think we do. I mean, we can pull up House Bill 1362, but it specifies that, you know, you will have a all electric ready and a solar ready and an EV ready energy code. You know, it does put in that 1%, you know, caveat, but the code that we should see come the end of March is going to, you know, fit the bill for the first bullet there.
then we do need to verify that. We would need to verify that because then these goals would be redundant
Sure.
and one of them would not be needed. So
Is
that's
that
important.
date, I mean, how certain is July 1st? How certain is that date?
It's in the bill.
It is, okay.
It is. The bill specifies that they vote by 30 March, that they, you know, if they don't pass it by 2/3, that by 15 April, they have the next vote and that it be ready to go and for implementation by sometime in June, so that as of 1 July, yeah, it's gonna be there.
Okay.
So,
Great. Well, then perhaps by the next meeting, if you want to verify that and be able to report exactly what's going to or what's in the bill exactly and what's going to come from those, that would provide some clarity.
sure.
Yeah, I'd be really.
Just
Yeah.
for all,
Website.
just to bring us all back up to speed, can you guys mind if I read you the summary of House Bill 1362, just so we know the language?
Okay, now have the summary that I put out there, right?
Yeah, I was just grabbing their summary from here.
Let's hear it.
You, yeah, I mean,
Here, just for the language, so we can condition our brains. Concerning the reduction of building greenhouse gas emissions and in connection therewith, requiring the director of the Colorado Energy Office and the executive director of the Department of Local Affairs to appoint an energy board that develops two model codes requiring local governments and certain state agencies to adopt and enforce codes that are consistent with the model codes developed by the Energy Code Board, creating the building electrification for a public building grant program, creating the high energy efficiency electric heating and appliance grant program, and establishing the Clean Air Building Investments Fund. So that was their marching orders based upon it. And then Dave did, fleshed out all of the other elements that you're gonna pull that
sorry,
up.
go ahead, don't mind me.
So, anyway, that's what came from the legislature. So how those are all gonna be constructed and articulated is that's the sausage making part of it. It's happening behind the scenes right now. And the link that I sent to you guys is they've already had 2 sessions and those are recorded and you can look at those. And the next one's coming up on the 21st, and that's also public and that'll be recorded. So it's the actual process of this. And they're doing the same thing we're doing in this meeting, trying to figure out which ones to zero in across the entire spectrum of building code.
So we don't know.
We don't know exactly, but we know what their outlines are. And I should have just taken the agendas from their different meetings, and I'll put that into the Google Drive as well, so you know how they've framed their discussions.
Well, I just hear what Joyce is saying. I feel the same way that I'm a little comfortable with this gap at the end of the moratorium to the 1st of July or whatever. I mean, that's when the state goes into effect. And we may need to keep up what we want to do after that. And then we have to go through the whole town council process. So it might be October before anything concrete gets done. And as far as what we're talking about here, so
And from a
Please.
management perspective, are you resistant at all to that notion that we try to get ahead of this, ahead of the state process? Would it be hard for you to implement this? If we came to the council on this next week and said, we want you to ratify or mandate that all future building in Ridgway is all electric. If we came and said that next week, is that something that could be implemented, or would the council just be like, we don't have enough information?
Well,
We're gonna wait.
definitely wouldn't have enough information in that scenario, and you have to have public engagement, you have to have an ordinance developed, you have to have 2 readings of an ordinance, you have to post public hearings, so you have that whole piece, but it's gonna go as fast as this group goes. You all are an advisory board to the town council ultimately. And this is another piece, and a fantastic piece to have in place to enhance the public engagement, right? If this board wasn't in place, I bet a pretty penny each and every one of you would maybe attend a meeting or send an email at some point saying, hey, we should really be EV ready or solar ready. And this is a really great, local government, good governance avenue to enhance the public engagement piece. So that's what, that's the heart of this committee in essence. But it's only going to go as fast as you all take it. And it has to be a very thoughtful and strategic process. Just going to the town council and saying, please do this. That's not how it works.
No.
That's not how it works. This committee has to do the homework, has to do the legwork. And nothing on here is too cutting edge, which I think is great. The best thing about local government is you can plagiarize. And I say that carefully, but truthfully, that's the best thing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You take what other communities have done and create your own, make it your own. Attributing when necessary, but making it your own. And that's what I think this committee should be charged with when trying to achieve some of these goals, or recommend that these goals be achieved.
Well, because it's endless how we can educate ourselves. We're never gonna be finished. Is it possible to get the wheels turning without having like all this final information? Is there a way to impel town council to start that lengthy process that takes 3 to 4 months, 3 to 4 town council meetings to get things passed? Is there a way to like dovetail and work together instead of like us does the grindstone and get all this stuff and then present it and then go through that process? That makes sense?
I think so. What you're seeing on the board kicks off that process, and town council's in agreement that we want to move forward and start to achieve these goals. It's up to this board to lay out the framework and the time frame, right? I don't know if I'm answering your question, but you all need to collectively decide how to go about that. I'm here to help guide.
Well, is there some kind of minimum amount of information for us to have to start presenting to town council to get the wheels turning? I'm just thinking time frame.
So
I think that's
question. So let's stay on that. What do you want to present to the town council? And what information are you looking from them?
Can you pull up the Word document I just sent you, which is a House Bill 1362 summary that's verbatim, and I'll show you what it says. Because I don't think y'all are familiar with the wording in.
So real quick, I think that's a little off from what we were just talking about. And I don't have email on this computer.
Okay.
So let's take one thing at a time. So in what Vicky had posed, you want to go to town council next week, right? What do you want? What information?
First now, I feel like like I said, there's just so much to learn, but I'm wondering if there's a process or a way to get the wheel turning, so we don't wait till 3 more meetings of us to feel like we have a really great foundation and then present it to town council. And then like the process you described, like it's 2 or 3 months of different meetings, deliberations and workshops. So is there a way to make that process happen a little faster? Like, so I get, just to throw out again, like what's the minimum that we can present to town council and get started?
But I think this might be going great to Dave then, because the point is that we have this thing called House Bill 1362 that's set this in motion from the legislative side of the state. Now they're in the process of putting that together. We need to introduce that to the council. I do know you said you think that we're inclined and we're somewhat educated, but we don't understand the full context. So right now, the context and the timeline are one and the same. Dear Council, 1362 has been rolled out. Right now, their board has been appointed. They're working on coming up with these new codes. They're going to vote on it on March 31st, April 1st. Theoretically, we have a solid understanding of what those mandatory codes are going to be and the exemptions. And these are the things you as council are going to need to consider as you change the code here in town. And I think that kind of introductory salvo is what we need to be able to have as a deliverable to the town. And in that process, we need to come up with the comps, other towns that have done it around the state, Aspen, Crescent View, Boulder, and understand the pros and cons of those, and tell that to council. These are the things that they've succeeded on. These are the things that they've run into, roadblocks they've run into, snafus, things that have backfired. And then with the code coming now, we want to be ahead of the game, and we think you need to have this information based upon these scenarios to consider going forward and writing the code. Is that more than enough to start with as a deliverable to council?
I think so. And then are you asking for direction from them ultimately? What are you is that purely informational or what, what's the deliverable?
So then the second part of it is then samples of code handed to them so that they have, or do we make the suggestions by distilling it down and saying, this is what we think is the best case scenario for this town moving forward?
So I think you've seen in council meetings, we put together staff reports that try to be as informative and concise as possible. And that's tough sometimes, depending on the information. Sometimes there's a lot of information. In that scenario, I think that's what you're gonna want to do something like that. Memo to Ridgway Town Council from the Sustainability Advisory Board with a summary, introduction, comparable communities, pros and cons from each, financial implications. Stuff like that. That's just an example based on how staff outlines those memos. And then ultimately, why are we here? Is it, further direction on what to proceed with, which community to mirror, which community not to mirror? I think ultimately you're looking for direction from the town council on how to proceed and how to continue to frame potential adjustments to the code. In that type of work session setting. And then, staff can work with you guys further to further refine code updates. Does that make sense? Is that what you're at?
So to that point, I mean, that structure right there that is obvious to you because you deal with it every day, that structure of summary, financial implications, can we have that to work with as a structure? Should we just emulate that? Would that be the most efficient?
You can make it whatever you'd like, but yeah, you can look in past council packets and see that structure. It's there's no right way. There's not an adopted format. You can just make it your own. But
I'm asking because we're swimming.
Right. But good question. Yeah, we can certainly help. And I'm here to help as you go. You wouldn't just write something and send it out. I'm happy to proofread and help you navigate that process.
What if we sent this memo that we were discussing and asked for the moratorium to be extended until July? To where the code is, we finally have the code. Why couldn't we do that? Could we do that?
You certainly could. It's your prerogative to make a request, but again,
This is our task.
the energy component is not why the moratorium was put into effect.
I know,
There's no-
but under the covers.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can
I know
certainly do
it's under
that.
the covers it is, but we have to word
Actually, that's a
it.
really good way to put it.
I think it's a great idea.
So what do you think about that idea? What do you think as being on the council? Then we wouldn't be so paranoid, right? Until July.
I don't know if I'm paranoid, but
I am.
You certainly could. Again, the reason I didn't mean to jump in, but I will. the moratorium was put into effect for very specific reasons that were outlined in that emergency ordinance.
Right.
And the deliverables and the pieces that need to happen for the moratorium to be lifted even before March 31st of 2022, which I think will happen. I think we're going to get the code updated prior to that date. It's going to happen. So, rest assured that we're going to hit on what we're supposed to hit on as it relates to why the moratorium was put into
Okay.
effect. So I just wanted to offer that.
And I wanted to bring up to, this kind of speaks to Vicky's suggestion, and my experience with dealing with bureaucracy is the better your submittal is, the better it's received by whomever you're submitting it to, in this case, the council. So you just don't go in with something vague and sweeping. Just, we don't have to be super specific, but at least, put some,
Right.
but yeah, I feel your urgency and yours too, Joyce, and yours.
Can I ask you a question mostly for you, Preston? So I definitely wouldn't want to like burden developers or staff and try and modify the municipal code twice. And it sounds like the energy code upgrade and it from House Bill 22 that's coming out, those may impact the municipal code or be tied in together with building codes and things like that. They're all kind of linked together. So possibly if there's new development happening, I was just curious on, say, mostly for like larger developments, so either commercial or multifamily, when it goes through your planning review process, is there a way to just, without changing the municipal code and doing that twice, just requesting developers to do an evaluation of what are your additional costs to make it EV and PV ready? So like, I'm the lucky beneficiary of having EV and PV ready in the Lena Street Commons, right? And so I imagine that process was either the council or the planning commission requesting that be evaluated. The developer looks at talking to a contractor, what does that cost? What is the total cost and the cost to make that? It's say less than 5% of the total building cost. And now the cost per unit that they break down is still like within a reasonable amount. So now it's not like, okay, it's become a burden to the developer, it's 50% cost, and now the units are like unaffordable for everyone. So I think for me, I don't necessarily want to propose to council twice, like 2 separate modifications to a municipal code. I'm just wondering if the planning department and council and whatnot are already kind of requiring larger construction to be evaluating adding 240 and a conduit to accept, if they're already doing that, then like some of our concerns are already alleviated. And then we can just focus on the new code that comes out and how does that tie into what our goals are.
So those are elements that are negotiated through the PUD process. The
Okay.
Commons went through a PUD process, which I could go on and on about what that means and what that provides for, but it's a very flexible type of zoning and entitlement process for developers and the town to negotiate things like affordable housing units, ready, solar ready stuff. And so that is happening currently in the way the code's currently structured for developments going through a PUD subdivision process. That's going to change a little bit with the code updates, but yes, that's currently happening and will continue to happen. So I don't know if that answers that specific question, but or a part of the question. And then again, the code updates, you're well aware that we're undertaking now are just specific to the land use realm.
Right.
The land use and zoning regulations are to provide clarity on application types, review processes, and the timelines. That's in essence what is happening now. it seems inefficient to do all these different code updates. It's just, it's part of the process. Code updates are going to take a long time. They're going to take a long time because you got a red line. You know, we don't have a large staff. It's going to be me. It's going to be our town attorney, planners to some extent, and maybe even our town engineer taking a look at modifying all that. You know, you work in local government, you know how it works. And that gets expensive really quick, really, really quick.
Right, and that's why I was trying to just have an open dialogue, like I don't necessarily want to propose two separate modifications, but that's a lot of work for all parties involved, right? So just trying to streamline that. And then I think for most multi-use development, it is oftentimes like a PUD negotiation, unless it's already plotted for multifamily. So maybe most of the new development, the big new development will already have those components that some of us are maybe nervous about, like those sliding.
In that arena, it's implicit, right? It comes up in the negotiation.
Yeah.
But in terms of the mandatory and the codes and the timing, trying to figuring out we're on the highway to meet you, our entrance ramp, to meet your process, to most effectively get everybody on board.
Yeah,
Being the developers, the consumers, purchasers of residential properties, trying to figure out where we line up with you on the highway on that one. And what is the information that we provide when is kind of the crucial question, going back to even what we bring to council. As far as that information, and I think that's what we were trying to do to some effect, but in the context, I think Dave wants to talk about HB.
Well, I don't think people, I mean, that little bit at the bottom, that's straight from the bill.
Mhm.
That is, you know, they are going to produce a code which is electric ready, EV ready, and solar ready, and is to be implemented by Colorado towns and counties after 1 July.
Right.
And so, you know, to me, I don't see, I mean, for the purposes of adopting that code, I don't understand what more we need.
Well, again, this is new information to me. So I think maybe by the next meeting, we spend some time delving into 1362. I mean, this is great, but there's way more text in 1362 than this. So I think we just need to understand all of what's in there.
Right.
And the time.
Well, that's what I'm.
And what counties and municipalities and other state agencies are going to be held to exactly, and by when.
Right.
So, I think that's largely here, but I don't know for sure.
Right.
Is this a document that, this is what you put together, right?
Yeah, but it's pulled. Yeah, so it is verbatim from 1362. And yeah, I think we're talking around in circles because we're not all familiar with 1362 and exactly what it requires. But it is going to be, as I see it, the code language that we don't have to develop, that we can implement, we can tweak and put in place.
Well,
and so with that being said, I think my thoughts now are like, I kind of think to be efficient and not have everyone necessarily spin their wheels and look at a different municipality, you would take this model code,
Right.
look at it, and then as a team, you can kind of evaluate, like, are there pieces that are missing, like additional information that's needed, modifications to exceptions, like maybe details for other things. But I feel like until we can see that code, like I don't know what's missing. And I'm not necessarily sure if it's the best use of everyone's time to like research a code modification if this is coming out.
yeah, agreed.
So,
I agree. I think we'll see the
Yeah.
verbiage by the end of March.
mhm,
And so, at that point, we can decide whether we accept the exceptions that are in there and how do we work that so that by 1 July, we have something that the county is ready to move on.
So from March to July, if developers come in, they're gonna be approved without the code? Theoretically,
It depends on what they're looking to do. I mean, it's a long drawn out process, but until they get to the time of building permit, that's when they're held to. What's
so
in the
do you
code.
think it would drag through to
Oh, yeah.
July?
No, well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
oh.
I think what gets
okay.
lost sometimes is the
That's good to know.
moratorium doesn't affect standard residential building permits.
Right.
Folks are still coming in and
Right.
pulling building permits for single family homes. all-
Yeah, well,
all
that's,
over.
okay,
It's not like crazy, but like.
yeah, that's better than this.
And so, we want to affect the multi-site, multifamily stuff, but I mean, we're talking single family homes too, so that's important.
Yeah.
There has been a separate discussion at the Hebrew Community and Clean Energy Committee about whether this town might be able to move more quickly on these multi-unit buildings. And actually, I mean, the electric ready will do by 1 July or thereafter. But to make buildings all electric, we've shown that we can do that. All the buildings that are, multi-housing developments are all electric right now. Do we feel like the town could move more quickly on just, multi-unit buildings?
And by mandate or
By
suggestion?
mandate. Yeah,
Well, I think that might be something that Joyce was just talking about, taking on that piece when correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of what I heard, like, we get the recommendations from the energy board, whatever they're called exactly, and pick and choose additional items to further vet in order to be efficient and not have to come back at a later time. Is that what you?
Yeah, essentially, I mean, reviewing that code and then we would be able to figure out what modifications we might want based on that to fit our community, right? Like, for what you were saying, they're saying 1% addition as an exception, like we may feel that that is too low and want to modify that, or, I just don't know what's going to be in it, but I'm sure that there will be things that we would want to tweak to make it fit our community.
So if we went off of 1362, could we present? What's the word I want, to the town? Whatever the right term is, could we present our mandate to the town before July 1st, going off of 1362? And maybe the town would look at it and pass.
It wouldn't pass immediately, I think.
Well, I mean, they look at it, they could go through instead of waiting till July. What I'm saying is, could we go off of 1362 and present it around March when the moratorium dies?
31st.
at the end of March.
But I mean, is it gonna be cut in stone in March that 1362, what we read in March will be what we read in July?
I think in March, this goes back to what Dave was saying. I think in March, that's when the energy board will present their recommendations or have their draft. Everything they've worked for will be ready, right? This nice shiny logo on top. They will present that to whoever they're charged with presenting it
Well,
to.
they'll vote on it. So they will put it together and vote on it by the 30th.
But they aren't the final say. That has to
They
go
are.
to, they are
They are, but it has to be a 2/3 vote
of that energy
on
board.
that energy board.
But if they don't approve the vote, then
They
there would
don't
be
approve it.
modifications to that
If
draft.
they don't approve it, then it goes to their executive committee. So it's in
See,
there.
that's what I remember seeing is there's a
Okay.
committee.
But the executive committee is only there if the other committee is held up. So
Maybe,
But aren't they required to accept HB 1362? And they change? I thought it was cut in stone.
They don't
You
have
said.
to.
so in order to develop the code, 2/3 of the members of the board must approve each element of the model codes. If the ECB board fails by April 1st to adopt any element of the model electric ready and solar ready code, then that goes to the executive committee and they vote majority rules within 6 weeks.
Oh.
All right, so the committee itself can approve it with a 2/3 vote. After that, the executive committee is a majority rule. So that's that little bit at the bottom.
Great. May I make a request? Like, the very first item on the next agenda be like a PowerPoint or some sort, laying all that out. I'm happy to do it, but I don't really want to.
I bet Dave will
Dave's
do
good
it.
at it.
Dave's
Dave-
memorized the
Yeah,
whole
Dave
bit.
will do it. Yay.
Yeah.
PowerPoint on 1362.
Yeah, just all the requirements.
I love it.
Frame,
Sure.
Okay.
especially that last piece, the 2/3 vote,
Right.
executive committee, all that. I think that would provide so much clarity for us. And then going back to what Dana was asking, and even Dave before that, could we try to get ahead of it shortly after March, whatever it is?
Right.
Between March and July, who knows?
Right.
But that slideshow, however you want to put it together, thank you for
Sure.
volunteering.
Oh, yeah.
Being vol, it sounds like you were voluntold, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry for my confusion for running ahead when y'all are.
Well, it's good confusion, because I think I was
No,
confused.
it's
too.
got
I
it
think we were all like,
I know, sure, but yeah, let's all get on the same boat.
Right.
1362, yeah, it's coming.
Yeah.
I just, and I'm gonna send it to everybody as well, but I just downloaded the agenda from the second meeting that happened with the Energy Board and their discussion in the framework. Like I said, almost the same kind of navigations that we're having right now.
Oh, that's great.
They're trying to figure out how to prioritize things and present things to the public, so that they can get going on the code
And if you,
as well.
the Utah proposed, it's out there on the website somewhere. That's probably what we're gonna get is something like that. And it's 5 or 6 pages and it spells out, you will have a breaker in the box and you will have this size cable,
Right.
electrical cable to the area of the heater, and that needs to be this size area. It's basically all it is. That's what I would expect to see.
I would like to make a motion that we all, as I suggested in that email, all view those recordings between now and the next meeting so that you know how they're trying to navigate HB 1362. And I may have just hit reply
What's
all.
the name of those?
Well, we're in a meeting, so it may be illegal during a meeting.
I said it out loud.
Yeah.
Get a red card from Preston.
more like a yellow card.
Yeah. God.
Question just for clarity, to hear it from you. I already asked one question related to staff, and how you guys review things and staff suggestions. Granted, our job is to advise council, but also like, what is our best, do we interface at all through staff other than through you? I mean, is there a heavy lift that we can be doing in this process that facilitates staff and what it then presents to council as well? Is that just
It's a good question. It's tough to answer exactly. I mean, there's a dichotomy between politics and administration.
Yeah.
This advisory, like a clear line, and this group, advisory in nature, albeit is on the political side of that line, right? And so, policies, research. I'm on the staff side, administrative, try to get information ready to go. And so the answer is a little bit of a gray area. I mean, to some extent, you all could certainly assist. And I guess I'm curious about maybe what, if you want to further that question a little bit, like what are you talking about, working with other members of staff? Or are you talking about actually doing legwork specifically?
No, specifically on policy, like as we, work towards a summary of HB 1362 and how that's going to impact town, both in terms of practice and navigating applications coming in the door and in terms of changes of code. Is the work we're doing here just going to council, or can it facilitate things with staff as well? As far as as far as nurturing an electric ready community, how do we facilitate that?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know if I'm understanding.
And I don't know if I'm asking the question the right way either, because I is it confusing? The way I'm framing that, is that confusing to everybody?
You have something in mind, staff member you want to talk to? That's what it sounds like.
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
No, just like in trying to understand 1362, is that something that all of the staff needs to know about how it's going to impact them and the jobs that they do?
No.
And as far as planning commission, yes. it
Planning
will-
commission probably, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so trying to figure out what we can do in a practical way to synthesize that information to make it more efficient. That's where I'm trying to figure out the on-ramp.
And you're trying to reduce burden on staff too as well, right? I feel like that's what you were.
Yeah, which has been part of the moratorium's
Yeah.
objective as well, is to make the process more efficiently. So in terms of us doing what Dave has already done, is synthesizing 1362 and making it intelligible to everybody and knowing how it'll impact what we need to modify in our respective codes and being able to shine a light on those.
Yeah. Shining a light and getting that information together, that's great. I think that's something that you all should do and run with. Again, I apologize if I'm not understanding the question, but you all can certainly help in the regard of gathering information, putting recommendations together, and working alongside me to forward it to the necessary people, groups, through the channels.
It seems like we get a little derailed in the weeds a bit, and we haven't even gotten to the second agenda. It's 10:07,
Or
or the third one.
a third.
Oh, that's right.
No, what, wasn't there like talking about task forces or something?
That was an addendum that was added on there, but it wasn't there.
So if well, should we, I'll let you, sorry.
Can I ask before you wrap it up? Okay, so I just want to summarize and maybe you guys can correct me, but what I think is happening, and I don't have direct, we'll figure out schedules later, but ideally. This comes out in March, then in April, we would have the ability to review, it's likely gonna get passed. How I'm envisioning that it would get presented is that this advisory board would review the new energy code, the building modifications and things like that. We would look at what's appropriate and then redline and modify our building code, municipal code, whatever, all the things that it impacts. I don't know what that is yet, but we would redline and then kind of have Preston review it and then say like, we would like to make these modifications to our codes or things like that. So they're integrated in, and then Preston would do that. And then it kind of gets presented to council in addition to a memo summarizing what it is, why we're doing it, the importance. And then once council has it, then it's review, approval, and readings and all that stuff, right?
That's spot on. Just going back when you mentioned red lines, you're talking about redlining the existing version of the code or redlining what the energy code?
The new code, like,
New code. Yeah, want to be careful there because communities are going to be required to
so it's as strict or stricter is what they were saying. So like the red lines that I'm thinking we're anticipating were like, Dave had mentioned his concern about exceptions not being required to do this if the burden is more than 1% of your building cost. I don't know if that's what it's going to be, but that would be an example of kind of a red line or modification we would make to the model code. And, and we would agree on what seems reasonable as a community and for the developer, things like that, on what that might be, but
Gotcha.
those kind of modifications.
as long as it's all allowed and it's what we need to do to to make sure we're in line with 1362.
Yeah.
What you're saying, but yeah,
Yeah.
the way you laid it out made total sense to me.
Okay.
Anyone have questions on what she?
I have a question. So the bill 1362 is a federal bill.
Colorado
Oh, it's a
State.
Colorado bill.
House bill.
So this code, these people that are now looking at the code, they're gonna ratify this bill, 1362? Or is it a different bill?
Bill was signed in June.
So what are we waiting for that's gonna happen in March?
They
The
created,
model code. What's that? What's the difference?
I'll give a presentation.
Okay, but is it
And it's gonna be very thorough.
from 1362?
Yes.
They're just looking at it?
Yeah.
Okay,
And I'll.
all right.
And I
I'm
will
sorry, I just didn't
also-
understand that.
I will send to all of you my summary of 1362, which is 2 pages, and the whole thing,
Okay,
which is like 50 pages. But it's really, and it really has to do with 2 different codes, all right? One of them is the electric ready code, and the other is the energy efficiency code. That's our step 2. That's when we're talking about all electric. And actually, it specifies in House Bill 1362 that the code they develop can't be all electric. It has to allow, gas, all right? You can come up with a way of clean gas, or you can charge extra, who knows what they're gonna come up with. But it has to include gas. It can't include solar. You can't mandate solar. That the code, the next code, the one that comes out in 2025 will push for all electric, but you can't rule out gas and you can't require solar. That's, but that's step 2. Let's focus on step 1. That's the, pre-wiring code. We'll talk about it next meeting. I'll send you stuff to read in advance. And then you can decide next meeting whether you think we should present to the town council to make them aware of this bill that's coming.
Absolutely. The other piece with 1362 that'll be important for us to understand is the milestone dates for communities to adopt.
Right.
Because it's, you have
It's
on or after July 1, 2023, and then I don't remember what it goes up till.
their language is anytime you amend your code after 1 July of next year.
I know, but then, but isn't there it's like anytime you adopt, but you have to do it by a certain date.
No.
It doesn't say that.
It doesn't say
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So we could just never.
You could put it off forever. Exactly.
That's the dumbest
But
thing I ever heard.
Then you have, but he was saying if you would modify your code, you have to
Yeah.
adopt it. So then
What?
he was saying if you modify your code after July 1, then you have to.
In
adopt
any way,
it.
shape or form.
Right.
Like
Oh, so
the
that,
spelling.
so that's the kick.
That's the caveat.
Question about the gas, I think I read that, because I've read so much. Was the gas thing exclusively for cooking?
Yeah.
It wasn't?
But that's, again, part 2. That's, for 2025, we're not gonna deal with that one. The focus now is to get our electric ready code passed. So,
go to the DOE website. Everything that we just talked about around in circles is all spelled out very cleanly right there.
Great.
Under the energy code board on that link that I sent to everybody. And it fleshes out the timeline as well, all the people that are member to it, how they were appointed by DOLA and the Department of Energy Board as well. Did we get down the road to answering your question from 30 minutes ago, Vicki?
so, see, any climate action, what do we need?
So, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, real quick. There's in the packet, there's an on the screen. The list of town of Ridgway actions within the regional climate action plan. This list of actions is a bit antiquated, even though it was done in I think late 2019, maybe even early 2020. I feel like there was some modifications in early 2020, but it's some really good stuff on here, but somewhat antiquated for some of them. I mean, it's already 7 o'clock. if you guys can do me a favor, take a look at this as time allows. I know we're all busy, but take a look at this and throw my way an email or whatever form you'd like, some suggestions for modifications, enhancements to these specific actions. An example would be, and I think when I said early 2020, I had added this space to create one. Well, that one needs to be modified because construction's done, but it's specific to solar system on the building, which it's ready for. A solar array can be constructed on top of that building.
It's your strategic goal number 21.
That was down there, so thank you. So, we're well on our way to working to a microgrid and getting that in this year. So long story short, you can take a look at these if you have thoughts.
Did you also receive from Kim the need to implement or update the implementation update spreadsheet? Did you receive that?
I don't know if I did.
She just sent that to me. It needs to be done by December 31st. I can share that with everybody. It relates to this as well. But it's, I just opened the spreadsheet, but it's making me cross-eyed at this point.
So if you can share that,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
I will.
Maybe I just missed it, but we have to update this and get it to by, I think, the 12th.
Oh, okay, so,
So, you know, it's getting close, but as time allows, we can take a look.
Okay.
If I don't hear anything, I'll still give a go at trying to modify. That was it there. Thank you.
all right, we'll consider item number 3 completed then. So do we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Does somebody make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
To approve the minutes.
Somebody second?
A second.
All right, approved. Just as a capstone, 1362 is our Salt Lake right now. That's where we all need to go to and fully embrace that. And I think with that, I make a motion that we synthesize that in a way that we can present to council in February or March. An explanation update of what 1362 will, what it's putting on the horizon and how it'll specifically impact this town. Does that sound?
So I'll send that out to everybody. Please send me back any questions or, you know, I'm happy to keep diving on this, but yeah, any questions or concerns, send it back my way.
Yep. And with that, make the motion that we adjourn to the December 7th meeting of the Sustainability Advisory Board here in the town of Ridgway, Colorado. All right. Thanks, guys.
Has lots of things. Yeah. I'm a fan of the word.